If you've ever struggled to use Entra ID accounts to log into a Windows VM through Azure Bastion, this video has the answers you've been waiting for. Keep watching to learn how it works. Hello everyone, I'm Travis and welcome back to Seraltos. Today we're taking a look at something a lot of you have been waiting for, using Entra ID authentication with Azure Bastion for remote Windows VM administration. Before we jump in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with a friend or colleague. And if you want to go deeper on Azure, check out my courses at udemy.com. The links are below. Also, a quick shout out to my channel members. Thank you for your support. All right, it's 2026. By now, we all know that exposing RDP port 3389 to the internet is, well, a terrible idea. But somehow it's still the default when we spin up a new VM in Azure. Azure Bastion has been the safer alternative for a while, but there's been one big catch. It didn't support Entra ID sign-in directly from the Azure Portal, at least not until now. Microsoft just added previous support for logging into Windows VMs with Entra ID accounts straight from the portal. Until this point, if you wanted Entra ID authentication, you had to use the native Windows MSTSC client, install the Azure CLI, and make sure you were running Bastion Standard or Premium. It worked, but it wasn't exactly simple. With this new feature, you can now connect to a Windows VM right from the Azure portal using your Entra ID credentials. No domain accounts, no local admin credentials, just your standard Azure login. It ties into native access controls, gives a one-click login, and best of all, you don't need public IP addresses or open RDP ports to the internet. Huge win for cloud security. There are a few requirements you'll need in place before Entra ID authentication works with Azure Bastion. First, it's supported on Bastion Basic, Standard, and Premium, but not the free developer SKU. The VM must be running at least Windows 10 20H2, Windows 11 21H2, or Windows Server 2022. And the AAD login for Windows extension must be enabled on the VM. You can turn that on at deployment time by enabling login with Windows Entra ID, or add it later in the VM settings. And then there are the RBAC roles. Anyone connecting through Bastion needs the reader role on the VM's NIC, the Bastion resource, and the virtual network. If you're missing even one, the Entra ID option just won't show up. Trust me, I tried. To log into the VM, the user also needs either the virtual machine user login role or virtual machine administrator login if they need admin access. Coming up next, we're going to enable Entra ID sign-in and add the required RBAC roles on new and existing Windows VMs, and then walk through signing in with an Entra ID account. Keep in mind that this is still in preview at the time of recording, so things may look a little different by the time you're watching. Let's jump into the Azure portal to get started. Here we are in the Azure portal. We'll start by deploying a new VM. On the basic page, make sure to disable the public inbound ports. We don't need the public ports open if we're using Azure Bastion. We'll go to the networking page and change the default public IP to none. Move on to the management page where we'll take care of enabling this new VM for access using an Entra ID account. To do that, we need to add the AAD login for Windows extension. We can do this right from the management page during VM creation. Just select the option to log in with Microsoft Entra ID. That selection automatically enables the system-assigned managed identity. It also gives us a reminder that RBAC roles will need to be added, and we'll take care of those shortly. And that's all there is to it. Continue through the rest of the setup to deploy the new virtual machine. Next, we'll enable Entra ID on a different existing VM. We'll start by opening the VM and then go to Security and Identity. Turn on the System Assigned Managed Identity. This step registers the VM with Entra ID. Save the changes, and once that's enabled, move to Settings, then Extensions and Applications. From here, let's add a new extension. Find the Azure AD-based Windows login extension. Select it, choose Next, then go to Review and Create. This will take a minute to finish. Once done, go back to the VM. Under Settings, Extension, and Applications, it shows the extension has been added. The name might look a little different depending on how the extension was deployed, but the type and version will match. Now we've got 2 VMs ready for RBAC roles. Users can't sign in without a virtual machine RBAC role, and Azure Bastion won't work without some read permissions. So we'll start with the VM login roles. We could assign roles directly to the VMs by going to Security, Identity, then Azure Role Assignment. They can also be assigned at the resource group, subscription, or management group level. One of those are usually more efficient than setting roles at each VM individually. For this example, we'll open the resource group. We'll assign these roles at the resource group level. And since this is a lab, all of the resources are in the same resource group. We'll go to Access Control IAM, add a role assignment, search for Virtual Machine Login, then choose Virtual Machine Administrator Login for admin level access or Virtual Machine User Login for standard user access. Just make sure not to pick Virtual Machine Local User Login. That's not the one we want. Next, we'll go to Members and select the user or group that needs access. Then we can review and assign. And next, we'll assign the role. We're not done with the role assignments yet. We also need to assign the reader roles shown on the screen. Keep in mind that if the virtual machine and the Bastion are in different virtual networks, like when using VNet peering, you'll want to confirm permissions cover both. For this example, we'll give the user or group read access at the resource group level. You could scope that down if needed. We'll add another role assignment for reader. Select our user or group. Go to Review and Create, and click Review and Assign again to assign the role. And that's it. The user now has login access to the VMs. Let's test this next. This portal is signed in using the account we just granted access to, and the VNet has an Azure Bastion using the basic SKU. We'll open a VM and go to Bastion under Connect. You'll notice it defaults to Microsoft Entra ID. The other options are still available, but when everything's configured for Entra ID authentication, that becomes the default. If you don't see Entra ID listed as an authentication type, double check the prerequisites. The first time I set this up, I missed a reader role, and Entra ID didn't show up until that role was added. Next, we'll connect. You might get a pop-up blocker warning. Be sure to allow pop-ups. We'll try again. And it looks like we have to allow pop-ups on both pages. We'll try it again. You may also get a login prompt and a window asking for confirmation to continue. At the consent prompt, select Yes. The consent window may appear the first time you sign into the VM. And that takes us to the desktop. We now have Entra ID authentication working with Azure Bastion from the Azure Portal. That's how you enable Entra ID authentication with Azure Bastion and Windows VMs. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and as always, thanks for watching.